For hundreds of years, the church has been either complicit or silent about racism. Either way, we have been part of the problem. Breaking cultural stereotypes and social constructs is hard. But it's time that we pursue truth and justice and begin to let go of our distorted narratives once and for all. For some, this is hard to grasp, and it's uncomfortable, and understandably so. This series attempts to open a dialogue and to start a conversation in order to provide some new and better insights. Lord, open our hearts and our minds. Help me to understand.
Well, hello, and thanks for joining us again. My name is Richard Hoffman. In case you don't know who I am, I'm the pastor of Bronxville Community Church. We are a multiracial, multicultural, and multi-generational congregation located in the New York City suburbs, Westchester County. And I'm in the process of going through a series of interviews, talking with Black leaders about the issues of racism. And the purpose of it, and the title of the series is Help Me to Understand. And the reason that we're doing this is all of us need to gain a better perspective and a better understanding, and to really begin to think more about the area of race and racism, and to talk about real solutions that need to happen, and how we as the church and people in the church need to play our part in order to make a difference. But that can only happen if we're willing to submit to humility, and if we're willing to set aside our preconceived notions about what we think we know, what we think we understand about the topic of racism. So my guest today is Pastor Charles Moodie. Pastor Charles and his wife, Kehinde, are New Yorkers, but they felt God's call on their lives to go to Chicago, a city that they didn't know, a place that they weren't really maybe all that familiar with, but they were faithful and they went. And now they are the pastors of the Chicago City Life Center, located on the south side of Chicago in the Englewood neighborhood. And together they truly are the church, holistically meeting and addressing the needs of the community and the people there. And they approach those challenges in a very holistic way. And I have to tell you, they do absolutely amazing work. It's great to see them in action. And by all definitions, they are in the trenches daily, doing the hard work of the kingdom of God, working to change Chicago's South Side one life at a time. So Pastor Charles, my good friend, welcome. How are you?
It's great to be here, Rich. I'm doing fantastic. Been a little busy with a lot of the unrest that's been going on in the city. But overall, I am hopeful that God has truly given the church an opportunity to be the light of Jesus Christ like never before.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's great to see your optimism, and I know that that's just sort of who you are, and I'm glad to hear that. I know you're working hard. So let me just start off with a couple of questions, and I think this first one is an important question, and I've asked it to everyone so far that I've spoken with. Help me and help us to understand this phrase that seems to get people on the defensive right off the bat. Every time this phrase comes up, it seems to make people upset. The phrase I'm talking about is Black Lives Matter. Define that for me and tell me why you think it makes people so upset.
Yeah, I know most people want to say that all lives matter. And as a believer in Jesus Christ, and I believe that everyone was created in the image of God. So all lives do matter. But with the phrase Black Lives Matter, I just believe that so many Black lives have been destroyed, have been killed, without anyone ever saying anything about it. No one really addressing the issue of the Black lives that have been lost through senseless murders, through the police, through so many different things. We could talk about the military, Vietnam, protests, lynchings, so many things that has happened in our country that has gone unspoken. And that Black Lives Matter phrase is just letting folks know that these people who are no longer here, their lives matter, even though we don't know their name. And for people who really get upset about this, is like, don't my life matter as well? Like that's what I hear. Like my life matters as well. But the reality is, if someone of a different race passes away, you hear about it on the news. If there's a missing white girl who was kidnapped in Inglewood, you will hear about it. But there's hundreds or thousands of people of different ethnicities that go missing that you never hear about. But when it comes to, and it's sad to say, when it comes to like the white race, when we hear something happen, we make a big deal. For instance, let me just give you an example. You know that we host many teams here. And when I'm out there on the streets with my all-Black team, we never have a police escort. But the moment that I have white people with me, there's usually a cop sitting on the corner making sure that they're safe. That's my reality. Like that's what's happening right now in 2020. So that Black Lives Matter things is just a phrase that letting folks know, letting the cops know my life matters as much as the white people who's helping me out as well. But that's not what America really stands for.
Right. Now, I appreciate that definition a lot, and it makes sense. And it's so important for people to understand that that's what it's all about. So I know that violence and death and shootings and all sorts of problems are things that you're very familiar with on the south side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. I know that over the course of even the last couple of years, you've had people in your own church or even right in front of your church, there's been homicides and murders and a lot of things happening. Mm-hmm. But how does racism show up in a community that is almost all Black? Mm-hmm. Right? I know that Englewood is not 100% homogeneous, but it's probably pretty close.
Yes.
So in an environment like that, how do you see racism? What shows up there?
I mean, you'll see it in the systematic racism. For instance, this is fresh to me, right? This past Sunday, the mall across the street from my house was looted. When I tell you there was no cops for hours, there was not one cop for hours while the looting was going on, just to give people perspective. But the CTA, our train system, was shut down from 47th Street going north into the city, that there was no trains running from 47th Street going north, but everything 47th Street and south was wide open. The exits to get into the city was completely blocked off. Trump Towers had probably hundreds of cops protecting it. The city was well equipped so that destruction would not take place. But here on the south side, that's predominantly African American, we were left alone to fend for ourselves and just watch our community be destroyed and destructive. And I know a lot of people is like, well, isn't that their community? The mayor and other people saying 80% of the people who were looting were not from this community.
Wow.
There were people from outside. So when you talk about racism, even though it's African American, things are just not done the same way. We don't have programs to help people of this race. Some people have just given up. These folks are not going to learn. These people are not going to change. So they have given up on the south side. The way the police interact with someone in this community, even and racism, I know it's one race against the other, but even police officers have fallen into this culture where Even if they're black, they treat black and brown people different than they would treat white people. Our school systems, our post office system, like I have never seen anything like this before. And I just believe it's because of the people that's in this community, that they could treat them a certain way that they wouldn't treat a different race. So we see it in so many different levels, and we try to work hard to bring the level of service from the church, from our preschool, up to the level that we would treat someone who's in Bronxville. We're not going to treat them differently just because they're poor or because they're uneducated. We want them to know that they're going to have the best service that they would have somewhere else in the city.
Yeah, that's great. I understand that. So you're saying that a lot of times things just show up because they're kind of built in.
Yes.
It's just built in, and it's just what's happening. It's just what people have gotten used to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to deal with that.
Yep.
I know last year in Chicago, and I had been there just prior to this event,
Right.
but the city was on the verge of a violent outbreak as they were awaiting the verdict of a white police officer who shot a young black man. I think it was at a McDonald's, and there was something with
his name was Laquan McDonald.
Oh, really? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Laquan McDonald. So that's a name to remember. But I remember there was something there was a video in the fast food place, and some police had perhaps tampered with it. But once the video came out, it was very clear. And there was fear in the city, not only about the violence, but the violence was provoked because they were assuming it was just going to be another one of the times when he was found innocent and ignored. But he turned out to be found guilty, and the violence stopped, and it calmed down. Mm-hmm. But my question is these things, even what we've seen in the last couple of days, in the last couple of weeks, they're certainly not new. They happen again and again, but it seems like the conversation stops. How do we keep the conversation going this time to try to find real solutions and just start preventing these things?
Yeah, that's a real good question. And this is the reality. If the conversation stopped, we will be back here again.
Right.
Not a few months, in a couple of years. We will be right back at this same place of unrest. But the conversation, I believe, stopped because this was like the first time in Chicago that a cop was found guilty for such a crime like this. And I think people were content with that. But I believe that the only way that the conversation is going to continue to go on is by continuing to keep our ears perked to the things that still taking place. Like, these things didn't end. It just hasn't hit the media like how these other incidents have happened. And it's the only way the conversation is going to continue to go is by people continuing to voice it. When someone of a different race sees injustice happening, that they will allow their voice to be heard. The individual who have been treated unjustly, they have to also allow their voice to be heard and also begin to make reports. I think you're aware of my son being pulled over by the police and handcuffed. And my wife and I want to be the agents of change in our community. So one of the things that we did was we made sure that we reported the police officer, and that we will continue to follow up so that there will be change that would happen in our police department. So the only way the conversation is going to continue to go, is by people addressing these issues, not just the Black people, but I'm talking about all races coming together and lifting our voices up and saying, this is not right. This is not okay.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's a word to all of us, isn't it? To continue to speak up. When you see something, just don't say, I'll get to it later. Right? Yeah. This issue is too important. And we need to really start saying enough is enough and move forward. And I really hope that this is a time that's going to happen, because otherwise this structure continues and there's nothing that happens. It stays the way that it is. So as a pastor, dealing with sort of race issues all the time, and how that impacts your community in so many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share your thoughts? Again, you're coming from the position of the church. Can you share your thoughts on how the church has been more of a part of the problem over the years than a part of the solution in stopping racism?
Yeah. Man, this is huge because I don't know if you knew that my wife and I, we were really part of the pro-life movement. And I would say the evangelical church has been very quiet on these social issues at large. I've been trying to keep our noses clean, our hands clean from getting dirty with the issue. And I believe that the church has the voice to really begin to bring about some of the changes in our community. One thing that that I was just looking at in my scripture. Could you still see me, Rich?
I can.
All right. So in Psalms 82, verse 2-3, it says, "How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked." And this is part of my message for Sunday, that I believe this is what the church is truly called to be about. And by us turning our eyes, our heads from the issues that's taking place, we're not going to see the change. And I believe that the way that America is today is because the church has not used its voice to stand up for the injustice in our community. And I just believe that the church, just as we are so that we're so engaged with the pro-life movement, we need to be also engaged with the social justice movement as well, and begin to speak about the injustice that's taking place. I know that there's a separation from church and state, and I've been taught, being a minister, that we don't allow politics into our pulpit.
Right.
But being here in Chicago, the reality is I don't think you could separate the two.
Yeah.
Just like unborn babies being aborted is a moral issue, people being oppressed and unjustly treated is also a moral issue that the church has to allow their voice to be spoken up to. We can't just vote for parties anymore. We need to begin to see that the people who are voting for, are they really pro-life? Are they really about protecting life from the cradle to the grave?
Yeah.
Or are we just seeing people who we're voting for who just stand on a political party that say they're pro-life, but they're really not pro-life? I would consider myself, I'm not pro-life, I'm not pro-choice, I'm whole life, Rich. Whole life. I consider the whole life of the individual, not just from when they're conceived.
You know, I think that is one of these really important points, this whole idea of being whole life. I like the way you're putting that rather than designating it the other way. Mm-hmm. Because I think too often, if we get stuck on one particular issue and we begin to ignore the others, you know, we're ignoring then the whole gospel and the whole counsel of Scripture, and we're not recognizing who we're called to be as a church. So I really appreciate those words and that call to the church to actually become part of the solution in areas where it's not quite as easy or not quite as comfortable. I think a part of that has to do with we dislike being uncomfortable so much. Yes. That we want to gravitate towards the things that are sort of easy.
Yep.
And this requires us as the church to admit that we've missed some things, and requires us to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work. And I'm so grateful for this conversation, because this is what I'm trying to get at. I want to help me as well as others to understand what we've been missing for too long.
Well, one thing that, and I'm not just saying this because Pastor Rich is my friend, or I'm trying to blow his head up, but for him to be a white man and to come to the south side of Chicago is amazing. I was going to say something, but I better not. My other pastor from New York, Jimmy Williams, he came from New York, and he visited me with his wife as well and stayed in my house. Rick, you also stayed in my house. And I believe this is how race relationships really change, by you coming into a community and embracing that community, and the people in the community seeing, wow, Pastor Moodie is a Black man, and he has this white man who's staying in his house, eating his food. Like, they don't look just like friends, they look like family.
Yeah.
And I believe like that's the part where the body of Christ, we have to get better at being intentional about going after different race, even though it may seem uncomfortable, even though we may say something that's wrong. We really need to come together and sit together and dine together, live together, so that we don't really see this as just a Black issue or a white issue. It's our issue. You know, it's not a separate issue. It's our issue. It's an America issue. It's not just one race issue.
That's absolutely right, and I do appreciate that, and I love coming to Chicago. I love coming to the South Side. The people in your church are so wonderful, so amazing. They're so welcoming to me when I'm there. It's great. And by the way, the food in your house is actually really good, and the best night's sleep I ever had was on your couch. So just so you know, it does feel more like family than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know that Malcolm X famously referred to Christianity as the white man's religion.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that thought or that idea ever show up when you're trying to do ministry there on the South Side of Chicago?
Yes. Well, most of my younger generation, if I saw a picture of Jesus, it was always a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Right.
That's what the culture what's the word I'm looking for? Portrayed, anyway, Jesus as a white man, even though Jesus was a Jewish man in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So the white race kind of took Jesus and created him to be who they are, you know, or who they wanted them to be. So that's one of the issues that we see, right? Just the imagery of who Jesus is supposed to look like, right? People, even Black people, tell me today that Jesus was a Black man. And I said, I believe Jesus was a man of color, but the Bible distinctly say that Jesus was a Jewish man. You know, right. He was of Jewish descent, which is a culture, you know what I mean? Not just the color of someone's skin.
Sure.
But also one of the biggest things that I recognized being here, and I was guilty of this as well, Rich. The Christian race has this colonizing attitude that when we come to a place, and that's why I believe Malcolm X would say that it's a white man religion, because when Christians go into a community, they tend not to embrace the community. We force the community to embrace us. And how do we force the community to embrace us? Well, we have education, we have wealth, we have all of these things, we have resources. And if you want any of our resources, you have to begin to conform to the things that we are teaching you. And if you don't conform to the things that we're trying to teach you, we will just go somewhere else and teach those people who's willing to conform to the things. So I believe when Malcolm X even says that, like, Christianity is a white man religion, I just believe it's that colonizing mentality of coming to a community and saying that you have to do things our way.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So it sort of transcends. And I'm so glad that you're talking about that, because that's the kind of thing that people need to hear. The gospel is meant to be contextualized,
yep.
Not changed, but the gospel fits into every context. It's not meant to only have one, right? Wherever we go, we can take the gospel there and know that it fits and it applies and it's necessary for every person we meet. And it changes them not to conform to a particular race or civilization, but to the image of Christ.
Yep.
And that's,
I learned the hard way here. When I came here from New York, I was working with the youth, and I thought that the stuff that I did in New York would work here.
Right.
I worked with youth ministry for 12 years back in New York. And I felt like I was never a youth pastor. Why? Because I didn't spend time trying to learn the community or the culture. Right. I was too busy trying to meet the needs and seeing the needs instead of learning what the community valued. And I would say, and that took me a few years to even get this out, Pastor Rich, where I talk about value. I have learned as a colonizer, right? As a colonizer, I came in with the mindset of trying to meet the needs of the people without learning what the people valued.
Right.
And once I learned what the people value, then I was able to meet the needs because I knew what they truly value and what they wanted. Instead of me coming from the outside saying, no, you need education, you need job training, you need counselors, you need better education. And the people saying, I need a lot more than these outward things. I need something that's going to help me from the inside out. And once I began to learn that, then I was able to become a true minister on the south side of Chicago.
That's fantastic. I mean, what an amazing thing to come to grips with. And I think that just speaks to the power of the gospel, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's great. And I know that you've actually accomplished that. You've been able to interact so well. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the interesting things about the south side of Chicago, from what I've read and learned and talked to the people when I was there, is that the majority of people all came from the same place in Mississippi after the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And the reason that the community has sort of stayed the community that it is because they were subjects of what was the forerunner to redlining. Right. And it's kept the community as it is. How do you see that particular part of history, both positively and negatively, on the south side of Chicago?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I love is like you've been here, like that most of the families here still have a Southern accent.
Right.
Like, to me, that's amazing that they were able to still keep their culture. You know what I mean? Their foods, their upbringing, things, how they raise their children. Like, they were able to still maintain the culture that they had from Mississippi out here, you know, their cuisine and all of that. And I was just like, I was so amazed by that when I first moved here. Like, I didn't consider Chicago a Southern state, with most of the folks on the South Side with a Southern accent. So I just thought that was amazing that they were able to maintain culture. But what I've also seen, the devastating fact is that because of this culture being so tight and integrated, that they haven't really been exposed to other cultures and other things until some of them get out of school, graduate from high school, go to college, that they begin to be exposed. But for so many, just stay right in the community where they were born and don't leave.
Right.
Like, they stay there and don't leave. And I think that's kind of detrimental to some of the families out here, that they don't really get the exposure to see the rest of the world or even a country.
Sure. Interesting. Again, hidden things that kind of keep people locked in there. Mm-hmm. So you kind of mentioned a little while ago about some of the issues. When you moved there, I think it was 12 years ago?
8
years ago. Your sons, who are now teenagers, were young.
Yes.
So that must have been challenging with your family and having to deal with not only the change of moving, mm-hmm. but now the change of having to deal with all the things that you have to deal with. Mm-hmm. What are some of the ways that you were able to deal with that?
One thing that I think I really learned back in New York was family first. Mm-hmm. And we were very intentional about making sure that we had family time together, that my sons wasn't raised without their dad. I was very fortunate that I never missed one of my children's awards assembly or basketball games, that I was able to be involved in their life. And I think that was probably one of the things that kept our family strong and my boys centered, was that they had a dad that was truly, truly and a mom that was truly involved in their life. We had to do things very intentionally. Like our boys went to private school near the north side of Chicago because of the diversity. Okay. So we had to sacrifice our finances to make sure that our children had the best education possible. Our boys wasn't allowed to like go on public transportation until they were like in high school. Our boys weren't able to go and ride their bikes around the community, but I made sure that I went bike riding with them so that they could still have that kid experience as well. We were very protective of our kids, like very protective of the violence, knowing about the violence in Chicago, and just teaching our boys the do's and don'ts. Now, both my sons, they both drive, they both have their license. So we had to teach them how to interact with police if they pull you over. And my younger son and both my sons know how to interact with police as well. So there's just things that we had to do to make sure that we taught our boys how to survive, out here in Chicago. So we just did different things.
Yeah, and well, apparently you did it well, because I know both your sons and they're both good kids for sure.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap things up a little bit, give me, what are the top 3 things that you'd like to see change to get us closer to a solution in dealing with this racism and this ongoing problem that doesn't seem to ever stop? Give me 3 things.
One thing is that we need the church to be more vocal. We need to hear our pastors. We need to hear our the leaders of the denominations that we run with, regardless of what color they may be. We need the church to be vocal when injustice takes place. So I think that's one of the biggest things that, and when I say the church, I'm not just our leaders, I'm talking about the body of Christ. When injustice takes place, we need the entire body to speak up and say, this is not right, because I believe this is God's heart. This is God's heart. It's not for us to just mind our business. And I said this before, I said it to my congregation, for us to turn a blind eye to the violence that takes place in the community, just remember you're going to have to stand before a righteous and holy God one day. And this God is going to hold us in account to the things that we did not say and the things that we did not stand up for. So if we think that we're staying safe by not saying anything, I just share with my congregation, don't think that we're safe enough, that God is not going to judge us by not saying anything. So I believe the church has to say something. Another thing that I believe, another top thing, our political officials have to be held accountable. And they also need to have a voice when the injustice takes place. And if they have this type of apathy to the things that take place in our community, in our world, we have to let them know that you will no longer represent me because you don't care for the things that I care about. So I believe as we begin to care about issues, those who we represent is also going to care about us. Yes, I care about the pro-life movement, but the reality is, if those who I'm voting for do not care about all the other disparities that's going on in our culture, then I can't vote for you, because there's so much more issues than just the pro-life movement. I need you to care about all the things that I care about. So I think once we begin to have a voice about those type of things, those things we'll begin to see systematic change in our community as well. And then another big thing I would say is white people, Black people, Spanish people, Asian people, people from all over, European people, we have to become intentional about getting outside of our race and our comfort level, like you were saying before, and begin to be intentional about having conversations. I love to speak, as you could see. But one thing that I don't have a problem with is meeting people from different races and conversating with them and learning about their culture, eating their cuisine. I just love to learn about different people so I can have a different perspective of different things. Not just Blacks, but all different people, white people from the South, all different things. And I think we have to be intentional about going after people that we're not really surrounded with. Bronxville, I know it's diverse, you know what I mean? New York is diverse. So we had the opportunity to mix with different cultures, but there's, believe it or not, like Chicago is probably one of the most segregated places, right?
Yeah.
Some folks don't have the opportunity to live around Black people or Hispanic people. So those folks cannot just be like, well, it's not my fault because I don't live around them. We have to go out of our way to make sure that we're making friends of different races if we're going to really begin to see racism end in America. It has to be our friends that's getting hurt. It has to be our brothers and sisters who's getting hurt. And if my blood brother's hurt, I'm hurt. If my Christian brother's hurt, I'm hurt. And that's when we're going to begin to see the change.
Yeah, that's a good word. Being incarnational in what we do and being in place with people, not above, not below, in place with people to understand and feel what it's like and feel that pain. Mm-hmm. Wow, great word, Pastor Moodie. Thanks for that. Well, I really appreciate you being part of this conversation and helping me understand. And I know that your words are going to be helpful to many other people who are listening to this. So I really appreciate you as a friend. And I really admire and look up to you as a leader in that community and as a pastor and as someone who's, I know, doing the work of the kingdom day in and day out. You and your wife both, amazing people doing amazing work. And I look forward to continuing to work with you and continue this conversation with you as we move forward. So thanks, Pastor.
You're welcome. Thank you, Pastor Rich, for doing this. I know it's not easy. But I think it's the conversation that has to continue to happen so that we can see the change we want to see. Absolutely.
And we'll be praying that it happens. We got to just trust God and move forward and do our part and believe.
Amen.
So awesome. Thanks again, Pastor Charles. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon, hopefully in person one of these days.
Yes. It's cheap now. You can fly back. It's cheap now.
I'm telling you, I need to do it. So I'll be out there soon.
All right.
All right, good. I'll talk to you. Thanks again.
God bless you.
Thank you for listening. Now here is Pastor Rich with some closing thoughts.
Luke chapter 3 is one of the descriptions of John the Baptist in the gospel. And when I think about John the Baptist, I think about his faithfulness to his calling. John is the fulfillment of the prophecy that comes from Isaiah. He is the voice of one calling in the wilderness to make straight and to make smooth the path for Jesus to come to us, because in Jesus the world finds salvation. Now you can read that for yourself. That's verse 4. But in this chapter, we find a description of John. He's being obedient to his call. And this is what, for John, making straight and making smooth and preparing the way for the Lord looks like. And this is how then we, as the church, we as followers of Jesus should be applying this to our own lives, particularly as it relates to this conversation we're having about race and injustice. I've got 3 quick points. Here they are. Number 1, John starts by reminding us that simply because we call ourselves Christians, just because we identify as Christian and go to church, it doesn't mean that we are actually believing in and have been transformed by the power of the gospel. Because the gospel calls us to a repentance, and that should lead us to a change, and that change then should be evident in how we live our lives. Verse 8, John the Baptist says, "Produce fruit in keeping with repentance." Produce fruit in keeping with repentance. That's point 1. Here's point 2. The crowd then asks John the Baptist in verse 10, "What should we do?" And he responds by telling them, when you encounter other people, when you find people who are in need, you need to do what you can to help them. And the focus here is on our abundance of possessions. When we see other people in need, we have so much, But why do we find it so hard to be generous? Okay, so that's point 2. Now here's point 3. Now in verses 12 through 14, John is addressing those of us who have authority over other people in our society or in our culture. And he points this out. He says, use your position of power to treat people fairly and justly. Don't misuse your power and authority. And the example that he gives us is that of the tax collector and those who are part of the peacekeeping force. But certainly it applies to all of us, any one of us who hold any position of a power or authority at all. Because the fruit of our transformation that comes from the gospel ought to be apparent in how we live our lives and how we treat other people. So point 1, being a follower of Jesus requires us to have a transformed life as a result of our repentance. And points 2 and 3, we all have the ability to make a difference, to address injustice, and to impact other people's lives in a positive way. And we are all called to be good stewards of what God has entrusted to us. This is how John the Baptist was preparing the way for Jesus and describing the kingdom of God. Now we too need to be a reflection of the kingdom of God and what it's all about. And we need to be part of preparing the way for Jesus to come again. In John 17, Jesus prays for the church, and his prayer is that we all, the church, might be united so that the world can see through us how much God cares, how much he loves us. And we know that God's one desire is not to condemn the world, but to save it through Jesus. That's why he invites us to know him. So Lord, forgive us. Unite us as a church as we put our trust in Jesus.
I've seen some things that a man just can't ignore, and this world's gonna see what I'm standing for. I've kept my peace, but I can't hold my tongue anymore. You can't buy my silence, you can't steal my voice, you can't keep me quiet. I will break the noise. Try to beat me down,